Okay, we're going right through this chapter. Chapter 10, I'm looking at well, 1, 2, 3, 4, the first 5 verses of chapter 10, 10, 11, page 10, 11 goes. Again, continuing from last week, we were talking about this one line in the text, and it's the last line, Ye xing yi ru shi. Such is the nature of karma. And what we got into last week was this idea of, it's not just a Buddhist concern, but even little children, and I suppose it never ends, is the idea of how do things work, what's going on, how do things happen. What the text is offering, and you can see it from the first line, this is what all Buddhists say. So enlightened beings talk about karma as the determining factor in our lives. And I won't repeat what we were doing last week, but we talked about this more popular idea that our lives are ruled by fate, by luck, by chance. Anything else? Luck of the draw, and by external agents, even things like stars. That would be astrology, and objects. So there's a great thing around talismans and lucky charms and so forth that people hold to. But also this idea that, and this is old, probably the oldest religious expression in China was augury. Anybody know that expression, A-U-G-U-R-Y? What does it mean? Okay, doing the gesture. Augury is basically a kind of divination. Huh? Augury or augury, yeah. Right, and so it's, this goes back even to the, what they call the tortoise bones of the tortoise shells as a form of predicting, prophesizing, reading the external forces and then acting accordingly. Even prior to Confucianism or Taoism and Buddhism, this seems to be, and it's not that it was just in ancient China, it was throughout the ancient world. In fact, for example, the word contemplative, contemplare, is from the Romans used to create a space, or temple, outdoors usually, and then the priest would be in that inner space and read the signs. So it was a reading of the signs, and usually from birds. As birds would pass over or events would occur, they would look up to the stars and the birds and whatnot, and that's where contemplation comes from. So initially, contemplation was going outside to read rather than what we think about as going inside to read. But what I'm just pointing out is that this is very old. It's been around for a long time, and it ain't gone. So it's still very much with us. So sometimes people go two ways on Buddhism. They represent it sort of, and you'll see this throughout the Buddhist world, as a kind of religion of spirits and deities that one is praying to, exhorting, supplicating, making offerings to in the hopes, this is very transactional spirituality, in the hopes of getting something back. And then there's another representation of Buddhism as being very rational, very non-superstitious, very much logical, and also completely using what we call zili, self-power, one's own power, and then of course the outside or external powers we call tali, other power. And so depending on your orientation, people tend to go one way or the other. I would say in a place like Berkeley here, and there is a little more zili going on with people coming, taking charge of their own lives, using meditation to get rid of faults and bad habits and calm the mind and open up some kind of direct knowing and seeing. But I can tell you from my travels, and I was quite shocked the first time I went to the larger Buddhist world outside San Francisco, where into Malaysia, Thailand, Japan, China, India, and the idea of the invocation and devotion to the spirits and deities is very, very much prevalent and very, very rich. And I told you the story last week about Master Hua when we were traveling in Malaysia, how he alienated the audience 1 by 1, 2 by 2, 10 by 10 by criticizing maybe or calling out what he considered to be just superstitious practices that had infused into Buddhism. So what I wanted to do tonight a little bit was maybe go into that just a little bit. Into when I was saying last week I got into it, it's not so black and white and clear. It's not an either or. I'd like it to be an either or, very simple, that Buddhism is a very rational, psychologically astute, spiritual teaching on how to develop your full capacity as a human. And it doesn't really have anything to do with what people call the ghosts and spirits and devas and deities of the other. Sometimes they use supernatural to describe this. But as I look back at my own teachings, my own experiences, and then the texts themselves, I saw it's a much more nuanced and complex picture that emerges on this. And these are not distinct, autonomous, separate entities or worlds, but they're rather intersecting all the time. And I said this week, I mentioned last week a couple of texts, and I was going to go and share those with you tonight, just go through them, reading them slowly. One, because I really like them. One was Ashwagosha's Buddhacharita, which, anybody know the date of that? Probably not off the top of your heads. They're doing, what is this, what's the game on TV they do? They give an answer and they ask a question. Jeopardy, yeah, but this is Buddhist Jeopardy. What's Buddhacharita, Ashwagosha? Yeah, 1950s. No, actually about the 2nd century of the Common Era, early 2nd century, so about 2,000 years ago. He's writing this. And I mentioned one of my colleagues, Sanskritist, said he's considered to be the Shakespeare of Sanskrit. So his poem, and if you get a chance to read it, the one I would recommend is there's something called the Clay Library, C-L-A-Y, Sanskrit Library, and I forget who the translator is, maybe Oliville or somebody like that. Really great read. It's a really fun read. So what I was going to sort of say a little bit tonight, the Buddhist teachings do not deny the existence of such beings. Let's just start out there. And they don't even use the word supernatural to talk about them. They're still within what they would consider the natural world. So the Buddhist natural world is basically called the 3 realms, the desire realm, the form, and the formless realm. The Buddhist cosmology or cosmogony doesn't make these, it says these are realms and they exist and they're separate, but it doesn't present them as this is the real world, and then that is this imaginary or supernatural world out there. But rather, it is one world, and that one world includes the heavens and the hells and all the realms of existence. We've gone through this in previous lectures. Sometimes 18 are listed, sometimes more. Sometimes you have the 6 paths within the Dharma realm: hells, animals, ghosts, asuras, devas, people, and then you have the 4 sagely, which are arhats, pratyeka Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and Buddhas. So 10 realms, but that can be broken into much more, especially when you get into the various heavens, because the heavens break down into manifold different types of heavens, as so with the hells. But they are all basically subject to coming into being, abiding for a while, declining, and then gone. The Avatamsaka describes, although they're very different, say, between the hells, the animals, ghosts, asuras, devas, and people, we seem to be, all of us are basically have a kinship. And we have a kinship in that we are turning on the wheel of samsara, and that we are in conditioned existence. And there's nothing permanent about it. The Avatamsaka says all beings are inmates in the prison of the 3 realms. That's a really powerful line. All of us are confined within the prison of the 3 realms. And so samsara means there is change going on, but it's change within a prison. You're changing cells, you go out, get a little fresh air for a while, and then you're back in. I'm using a metaphor, obviously. But the idea is even the joys that are experienced within that are transient. They're subject to anitya, which is, playing around tonight, more Jeopardy. I should do the Jeopardy well. Let's do it this way. The Buddhist term for impermanence is, and you go, what is anitya? Yay! Bang, you get some money. Okay. The Buddhist term for not self-existing. Huh? Anatta. Very good. You got those two together, the impermanence and the non-self-existing reality that nothing is permanent and unchanging, that is constant flux, leads to the third, what is called the third seal, which is dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness as these combine. That describes the unawakened transmigration of existence throughout all these realms. What they have in common is that. So whether it's in the heavens or the hells, it's not permanent. There is no lasting self involved in that. And you're just flowing and turning in samsara. So the idea then of fellow inmates is actually not what I made up. It's actually coming out of the Avatamsaka if you extend their analogy there. Oh, I thought I heard something. Huh?
I just laughed because you said fellow inmates.
Yes, fellow inmates. We are all fellow inmates. But also with this shared kinship of the 6 paths. But the thing I want to bring out tonight, and I do it softly, because again, it's complex, but essentially, how I read the text and how I read my teachers' teachings is, although they exist and they are dynamic and they are interacting with us at all times, sometimes we're aware, sometimes we're not, but they're never absent. So we live in a very variegated, rich world of beings. We're usually only aware of animals, if you think about it, that realm, and even to that we're a limited extent because we keep extinguishing species and don't even know we're doing it, but that's beside the point. And sometimes people are aware of devas or deities, and sometimes they're aware of demons. Sometimes asuras, I'm not sure, because asuras can take on human form and animal form and so forth. But if you look at this, it's sort of like, wow, Darwin would go, whoa, these species here that are proliferated in this realm, and all made from the mind. all driven by, and that meaning all made from karma. Intentional action of body, speech, and mind keeps beings manifesting through these paths continuously. So they're there, but they're not relevant to our liberation, to our unbinding, to Bodhi. They do not determine that. Now, what I want to parse that with a little bit is, and then when I read tonight what we have, you'll see that there seems to be, they can help and assist, and they can also hinder and obstruct, but they can't determine that liberation, that final understanding. And that's where you get the, from the Dhammapada, no one liberates you, no one but yourself, no one can, no one may. You yourself must walk this path, do it. Buddhas only show the way. But I would say also these various spirits and devas also show the way, but they can hinder and they can help, but they can't take you across. I guess that's the strongest language I can use. Is that clear? It is, it's clear, but sometimes people like it not to be that way, that you're completely not involved in those relationships. But in fact, if you look at the mantras that are used within Buddhism, these are invocations and calling out of various spirits and devas and deities to assist, to help oneself, situations in the world, and so forth. So it's not like this is absent at all. In fact, it's a cultivated Dharma door. So let me go to this one tonight. Maybe I'll start with the Buddha Charita. Okay, so this is basically the life of the Buddha. Ashvaghosha describes how Siddhartha Gautama, who is to become the Buddha, has this powerful, and I explained it last week. What was the impetus, remember, for his awakening, his initial awakening? Remember, he goes out. He's in the palace and he goes out on various trips. He encounters someone who's sick, someone who is old. Hey. Okay, someone who's aging and someone who's dead. In that order, perhaps. In any event, in each one of these encounters, he has a profound, both depressing and like cold water splash on his face, awakening, like when he asked his assistant, what is that? Because he didn't experience that before. I remember the first time I was a child and I went to a funeral, I couldn't figure out, why is Uncle there not, what is that? I mean, it was really mysterious. And I in the biographies, including Master Waz and Hanshan and so forth, these encounters are the transformative events that lead them to spiritual cultivation often. The first encounter with death, real death. And so, but I told you, as related by Ashvaghosha, in each of those cases, devas had intervened to sort of shed a certain light on those encounters that allowed Siddhartha to see them in a more brilliant, rarefied light. It wasn't just he saw it, but the text actually says they had a dynamic influence on framing that in a sense. Not staging it exactly, but something close to that. Now that's very interesting. So here, after this, and I'm reading, then that one, mighty as Meru, as Mount Sumo, this I'm reading from Ashvaghosha, tells his father, he says, he wants to go forth, he wants to leave, and the father wants to hold him. And he said, if that's not possible, don't hold me back. For it is not right to obstruct a man who's trying to escape from a burning house. Whoa. So the next time your parents say, here's what you should do. When separation is the fixed rule for this world, is it not far better for Dharma's sake to make that separation on my own? This is very, very interesting. Since all things conjoined will separate, and that's the law of nature, isn't it far better for the sake of Dharma, for truth, to make that separation on my own rather than have it taken from me? Will death not separate me as I stand helpless and unfulfilled without reaching my goal? When the king thus ascertained the resolve of his son in search for final release, also called unbinding or nirvana, he exclaimed, he shall not leave. Dad. And he made arrangements for security and provided him with choicest pleasures. Okay. End of story. The Buddha indulged, had a good time, died, and that was it. No. Okay. So now we go, I'm jumping around a little bit. You have to imagine what those finest pleasures are, but they were probably choice. The text goes on, but even that, and it's describing the party that Dad sets up, the constant party atmosphere, and bring in the finest, handsome-looking men and women, young men and women who are all, and apparently some of the texts say that they changed the flower so you wouldn't even see a fading flower. It was changed, and everybody was young in Camelot, right? And then it says, the text says, but even that music of the finest instruments, rivaling those of heavens. Apparently, the music in the heavens is superior to ours. I haven't found it on YouTube yet. I'll keep looking. Even the rivaling of those heavens did not bring mirth or joy. The sole desire of that good man was to leave his home in search of ultimate joy, and therefore he did not rejoice. Now, here's the line. Then Akanishta deities, Akanishta deities, who practiced best austerities, became aware of his resolve, and at once they made those young women succumb to sleep at the party, and in unsightly postures positioned their limbs. These are the devas doing this. It wasn't just happening. One was reclining there, resting her cheek on her unsteady hand, tossing a lute adorned with gold leaf resting on her lap, as if in anger, though she loved it much. Another sparkled, a flute in her hand, lying down, her white gown slipping from her chest, looking like a river, the banks laughing with foam, the lotuses relished by a straight row of bees. I'm not sure what that means. Another slept embracing her tambour, as if it were her lover, with her hands tender as hearts and the lotuses glistening, and so on and so forth. And basically, they were snoring and burping and belching and the smell and everything that went with post-party. Okay. The closest I can remember was a sorority fraternity bash when I was in university the next day after, the morning after the night before it's called. And so, but what you see here is these deities, are called the Ashkanita deities, became aware of his resolve and then helped him see through this. So let me go on. And it says, although in this way, Shakya's son, meaning Siddhartha, the king's son, was enticed with priceless objects of sense, yet he found no content, found no relief, like a lion shot in the heart with a poison-tipped arrow. Then one day, with the consent of the king, he went outside to see the wooded groves along with able sons of ministers and friends, good at narrating vivid tales, yearning to find peace, basically going out to have a good time. He set out mounted on his good horse, Kantaka. The bells hanging from its bit were made of new gold, and gold trappings made it charming with flowing chouris, like the glint of, and I don't know what a drumavage is, so I'm gonna have to go back to my footnotes, mounted on a flag, but anyway, it was stupendous. Love of the woods and the exquisite land drew him deep into the distant forest, and there he saw the earth being plowed, with furrows resembling the rippling waves on water. Clumps of grass dug up by the plow littered the earth, covered with tiny dead creatures, insects and worms. And as he beheld the earth with all these strewn about, he grieved greatly, as if a kinsman had been killed. I don't know if any of you have had any experience similar to that, but growing up in Wisconsin on a farm, I really can relate to when you go out and watch the plows go through. Not only the rabbits and the mice and all their little homes are just dug up and turned, but of course all the insects and the worms and whatnot are just laid out there. On one hand, it's bringing in crops for life. On the other hand, it's in a cemetery. Anyhow, and seeing the men plowing their field, their bodies discolored by the wind, the dust, and the scorching rays of the sun. Oxen wearied by toil of pulling plows. Great compassion overwhelmed that great noble man. Now, this is interesting to me. This is before he goes forth. And so part of the thing is, it seems as if he's motivated by the desire to escape dukkha. On the other hand, he's equally motivated by a sense of compassion. And the two of them are going hand in hand here. Getting down from the horse, then he began to pace slowly across that land, deeply engulfed by grief. Reflecting on the birth and death of all creatures, and deeply anguished, he cried out, "How wretched indeed is this world." Getting rid of those friends who accompanied him, wishing to reach some clarity in his own mind, he reached the foot of the rose apple tree. I love this, the rose apple tree, in a lonely spot with charming leaves rustling around. So he goes and finds this rose apple tree. On that pure ground with the grass the color of beryl, he sat down and began to contemplate the origin and destruction of all creatures. He embarked upon a path of mental stillness. And achieving at once a state of mental stillness and freedom from worries, such as sensual desire, he attained the first dhyana, with thought and reflection tranquil, uninfluenced, and free of outflows. So here, what you have is a very natural development of deep contemplative samadhi, not taught, not trained, coming from just the observation of the world and pulling back and sitting quietly and reflecting, and suddenly his mind just sort of unravels and takes things apart and finds his calm. Thereupon he obtained absorption of the mind, born of discernment, with the supreme joy of bliss, knowing rightly in his mind the course of the world. Thereafter he pondered over this very thing. How wretched that ignorant people, blinded by pride, who though themselves powerless and subject to the law of disease, old age, death, should treat with contempt another who's sick, dead, or oppressed with old age. If I, being myself like that, should treat with contempt another person, here with a nature just like that, and this is the expression of his compassion, this is how he said, being one with everyone, it would not befit me, and it would not be right. I have come to fathom the supreme dharma. He thus rightly saw the evils of the world, the evils of disease, old age, and death, and pride of self, and in an instant it all departed from him, pride resulting from his strength, his youth, his life. He did not give in to dejection or delight. He did not give in to doubt or to sloth or to sleep. He felt no attachment to sensual delights. He did not hate others or treat them with contempt. Now, moving on, this is what I'm trying to do is to sort of say, here he is using self-effort. This is complete tsuli. He's observing, no mention of deities constructing this side. He's seeing the world through his own eyes from this perspective. And then it says, as this awareness, stainless and free of passion, began to wax strong in that noble man, a man approached him wearing a mendicant's garb, unseen by any other men. What? Wait a minute. See, a lot of people know, oh, he went out and he saw sick, he saw dying in, the old and the dead. And then he encountered a wandering mendicant. He did. A man approached him wearing a mendicant's garb, and that man was unseen by any other men. What does that mean? See, when you do the close reading, all of a sudden you pause and go, wait a minute, what's going on here? Others couldn't see this man, this person. So is he real or not real?
Yes.
Even though we can't see him. The son of the king then questioned that man, "Tell me, who are you?" And the man gave him this reply, "Frightened by birth and death, bull among men, I've gone forth as a recluse for the sake of release. I seek relief within this perishable world. I seek that holy and imperishable state. I regard my own people and others alike. Love and hate, essential things, have been extinguished in me. Dwelling anywhere at all, under trees, a deserted temple, a forest, or a hill, I wander without possession or wants. Living on alms food, I happen to get in search of the supreme goal." So when he says, "Who are you?" he says, "That's who I am." And having said this, he flew into the sky, even as the son of the king looked on. For he was, ta-da, a deity who in that form had seen other Buddhas and had come down to arouse the attention of the prince. So this being, this deity, at a certain moment in time when almost all the conditions from the self-power are ripe, comes down to give that extra support, that extra boost. And when he had flown to the sky like a bird, that foremost of men was thrilled and amazed. Yeah. And then perceiving the emblem of Dharma, he set his mind on how he might leave home. Then that Indra's equal, who had controlled the horses of senses, mounted his horse to enter the city. Out of concern for men, he did not go directly to the forest he loved. Intending to destroy aging, death, he set his mind on living the forest life. He entered the city again unwillingly, like an elephant king from a forest entering a corral. So he didn't go to the forest immediately. He went back to tie up some things, but it wasn't, once he got this charge and saw what he was going to do, he entered, it's really an elephant from the forest entering a corral. Wow. I mean, you ever see a noble, Rilke has a wonderful poem called The Panther, and it describes a caged panther pacing back and forth in its cage, just looking at the bars, but that immense, powerful energy confined within. Yeah. So, on seeing him enter along the road, a royal maiden crawled out, and so on, so on, and so forth, and so it goes on. So, what I wanted to do was to just take this section from Buddhacharita and emphasize that even in the first account, the earliest account of the Buddha's life, you have this intermixing of what we call the natural and the supernatural, or the ordinary, and whatever words we want to use about it. But from the point of view of Ashwagosha, and again, the point of view of cultivators who experience this, it's one world. It's one fabric. It's not different things. So I wanted to dispel the notion that the devas, the spirits, these beings are only Mahayana, as some people say, and the Theravada is strictly devoid of that kind of narrative and that kind of influence, and strictly about self-power and rational and so forth. So now, what I wanted to share with you, and we were doing this week in class, one of the most important texts in the tradition is when the Buddha turns the Dharma wheel for the first time. This is called the Dharmakappa Sutta. And you know the story behind this? You probably do, but just, no, you don't know the story behind when the Dharma wheel was turned for the first time? Supposedly. Anybody? What happens? How does it happen?
It's his fellow hermits.
Huh?
It's his fellow hermits, if I remember correctly.
Dharma.
His hermit, like friends?
Yeah, that's right. Right, he goes off with 5 other cultivators, and they're practicing extremely bitter ascetic mortification and skin and bones. And the Buddha has an awakening that mortifying the flesh and physical conquest doesn't lead to liberation. It has to be done with the mind as well. Ultimately, with the mind alone. And in any event, then he gives up that path of bitter asceticism and accepts an offering of, depending on how you, a gruel of some sort from a maiden who's out tending the flocks, and he comes to an understanding of what he calls the middle way, which is not falling into indulging in asceticism and not indulging in hedonistic pleasures. That's one way. This gets much more subtle what the middle way is, but for tonight we'll just say that. Then he goes back to the 5 that he's left, and the 5 are, oh, here comes Siddhartha the wuss. Ignore him, pay no attention to him. He left, he deserted the path. He's sold out. Yet, they look at him and go, whoa, he looks pretty good. And like brilliant and blazing with light and virtue. And they say, I wonder what he's doing. What is that about? And so he begins then to teach them the middle way. And he starts by saying, avoid these 2 extremes. Then he goes into discussing the origin, the 4 noble truths, or the 4, I would say, obvious realities. These are not so much truths as descriptions of the experience of reality we all know. Dissatisfaction, suffering, its origin, the ability to end it, and the way to do it. And he goes through this. Anyhow, this goes on, and he explains it very clearly. But what I wanted to share with you tonight was a lot of people don't, again, they hear the 4 noble truths. It's very psychologically accessible. It makes a lot of sense. And people take it up and begin to practice it by shamatha vipassana, holding the precepts, meditating, and so forth. And most of this is self-power. And then at the end of the text, because we did it at class this week, and some of the students said, wait a minute, what's that? So the text goes at the end. This is when he finishes, he says, and when the Blessed One had set the wheel of Dharma in motion, the earth devas cried out. What? The earth gods cried out. At Varanasi, the game refuge of Isipatana, this is the earth deva speaking. The Blessed One has set in motion the unexcelled wheel of Dharma that cannot be stopped by Brahmins or contemplatives, devas, Mara, God, or anyone in the cosmos. Wait a minute. All of a sudden, these devas say this is really far out, and this cannot be stopped. In other words, it cannot be obstructed in any significant way. Even, and by God they mean probably Indra here, which would be Brahman or Indra, Yintalaya. On hearing the earth devas cry, I'm reading the text, the devas of the 4 kings of heaven, more devas, took up the cry. The devas of the 33, Triastrimsha heaven, take up the cry. The Yama devas, the Tushita devas, the Nimirati devas, the Paranimita devas, all these devas of Brahma's retinue took up the cry. Where are they all coming from? You see what I'm saying? It's like he's turning the Dharma wheel, the 5 are listening, and then this event is happening. This is reported by CNN. No. Who's reporting this? How does it start? Rushir Woban. Ananda.
But he wasn't there, I thought.
Thus I have heard at one time. Well, we can get into the hermeneutics of that. He wasn't there. Yeah. At Varanasi, the game refuge of Isipatana, the Blessed One has set in motion the unexcelled wheel of Dharma that cannot be stopped by Brahma, contemplative Deva, Mara, God, or anyone else in the cosmos. And so, it says, in that moment, that instant, the cry shot up to the Brahma worlds, and this 10,000-fold cosmos shivered and quivered and quaked, while a great measureless radiance appeared in the cosmos, surpassing the effulgence of the Devas. Then the Blessed One explained, so you really know, Kondana, so you really know. And that is how Venerable Kondana acquired the name Ana Kondana, Kondana who knows. And that's how it ends. So what's going on here? If you just read this, people say, well, that's like the lotus or the Avatamsaka. But here it is right out of the most primal of the Theravada Pali text, is this rich description of the intersection of these beings and these worlds simultaneously happen. So I just shared that because I mentioned that passing. I hope you didn't find this too dull. But I mentioned this in passing last week, but I wanted to show you, actually share the text with you, because you might think, oh, Marty's making this up. You know, I do make up things, but I'm not making this up. And some people are quite surprised when they read this. And so what I'm suggesting is, you know, again, it's sort of like Horatio in Shakespeare's Hamlet. Hamlet sees the ghost and is moved on seeing the ghost to take action. I can't always agree with what he did by slaying everybody, but and Horatio says there aren't such things as ghosts. But Hamlet insists, I saw it. And then he says to Horatio, Horatio, there are more things under heaven than are dreamed of in your philosophy. Meaning, and his philosophy at that time was natural science. It'd be our science of today. So this seems to be what's going on in these texts. Now, let me go maybe a little bit of the bottom line. In an exchange with Master Wan, one of the students asked, and I'm reading this, does fate really exist? Do people have the ability to control their own fate? And Master Wa's answer was, superior individuals know that they can create their fate. I determine my own destiny, I acquire my own blessings. Disasters and blessings enter only because people sought them out. Wholesome, unwholesome retributions, however, follow us around like shadows. So this is a restatement of karma as the agent rather than the deities or fate or whatnot. Superior people create and change their destiny, whereas most average people think that everything is predestined. If you have faith and perseverance, you can leap from the level of an average person to the level of a Buddha. If everything were predestined, we could very well get our fortune read before we even start to study Buddhism, just to see if we have a chance of becoming a Buddha. None of the fortunes or misfortune in our lives are set in stone. Really important. Because even though karma is the determining principle, it is not inflexible in the sense that it cannot be changed or altered. If you are an extremely good person or extremely bad person, your destiny will be different from the average person because what you have done has gone beyond the bounds of the average person. So I read this tonight to share with you, and then we're out of time. Next week, we'll go back to the text because I want to go on about the metaphors that are used for karma. Anyway, for me, the takeaway is, again, from the teachings, is you make your resolve for Bodhi and you keep your eyes on the prize. You keep your hand on the plow, sort of as the old liberation songs go. And the Shurangama really talks about this as well. Ghosts and spirits, devas and deities are all in the mix, but they can't stop and they can't deliver. They can in some ways enhance or inhibit depending on your level of cultivation, but it is really up to you. Buddhas come from that resolve and from self-cultivation. But at the same time, it's important to recognize that the world as we see it is much larger, much more intricate and perhaps interesting than the one-dimensional me and mine that we find ourselves in. So the expression often is, if the Buddha comes, slay the Buddha. If the demon comes, slay the demon. And what it's talking about here is no matter what good state or bad state, what aiding or impeding element enters, you just keep on. And that's what Master Wa was saying with this perseverance. You persevere to continue. So that's it for this section. But, you know, I found a fun thing. I'll read it. If I can. So Heng Sure and I found our old journals that we didn't finish. And so I was just looking at this one tonight. I don't know if it has anything to do with what we're reading, but it kind of has to do with change. Master Wa's emphasis on there's nothing fixed or fated, we can all change. And that's what he said was the essence of Buddhism. So, and I'm not even sure where this occurs. It's obviously 70, wow. thank you for the aging thing. It was like 1977. And it's just like when I read this, it's like yesterday, I realized, wait a minute, 77, that was a while ago. I just had a student, I said, I was saying something, oh yeah, this happened, and the student said, yeah, I wasn't born then. Oh yeah. My mother wasn't born then either. Whoa. Then it hit. Okay, so I'll see if I can, we're bowing along the highway, and there's two little boys there. And one says, oh, they're just a creepy, weird religious cult. Let's ask them if they kiss the ground. We're bowing down. No way, says the other kid. Better get my light out. Ken gave me a light, and if you're patient with me for a second, I'll try to connect it. I'm not sure how to use it, but here it is. So, I wrote this when I was younger, and now I can't read it. It's small. Okay, this goes in here. This goes in here. And then this goes on, I hope. Look at this. Yeah, okay. So, does he kiss the ground? No way. Dare you to ask, chicken. I'm not a chicken. You are so. Chick, 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 chick. These are the boys teasing each other. I ain't a chicken. Prove it. Okay. Hey, mister, what are you doing? Heng Sure doesn't talk, so I have to answer. Bowing, kind of a way of praying. What are you praying for? For the world to get better. Give a prayer away at the end of the day to all countries and all living beings. And he says, well, that's nice. Hope it works. Me too, says the little squirt. That's the littlest kid. Do you think about your parents? You're out there alone, and this kid asks, do you think about your parents? And I say, yes. They've been really good to us, but not so, been really good to us, but not so good pay back their kindness. I haven't been so good to pay back their kindness. So now trying to do some good with our lives by helping everyone. If you can help everyone, that's the same as being good to your parents. Well, that's neat, he says. Yeah, really. Well, good luck. They're okay. Guys in the background. Yeah, really. Yeah, good luck, they say. Yeah, they're kind of cool. That's what I said all along. You did not. You said they were a weird religious cult, creepy religious cult. Did not, did so, did not, did so. Well, I changed my mind. Anyhow, I thought, what I try to do sometimes, not only kind of write down the thoughts that we were having with bowing, but to sort of get the voices and the conversations there. But watching these two boys change in a short period of time, it's really, really touching. Anyhow. Okay, any questions on anything? Back, yes. Can you drop your mask when you ask it, because I was... Hang on a second. Locke is going to come and wire you. It's kind of cool.
So you mentioned testing. Hear me? Okay.
Go ahead.
And so you mentioned that gods and deities cannot take you across. I was thinking about this similarly to the aids and also impediments we received from Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Since comparatively the gods cannot take you across, but can Buddhas and Bodhisattvas also take you across?
I go back to that original quote that I gave you from the Dhammapada, but it's not just in the Theravada text. no one saves you or takes you across but yourself. No one can, no one may. You must take yourself across. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas only show the way. So, for example, in the Ashwagosha piece I read, they come down to support, shedding more light on the experience that that person was having. They don't create the experience, they can't. So Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are sort of guides, mentors, companions, to nudge, to help, to support, but they cannot literally save you in that sense. If you look at it that way, it would be if we are not all, delivered or saved at this point, it would either be because the principle is it can't be done by others, or they lack compassion. They just leave us here. So obviously, what's going on here is, and if you look at especially the Avatamsaka, it's rich with bodhisattvas who are deeply committed to staying in the realm of living beings, working alongside with similar deeds and so forth, to teach and transform, inspire, guide. And of course, the best one to look at that is the journey of Sudana through 53 of these teachers and advisors who help and assist him. But in the end, it's his own efforts that bring about the liberation. So it's not like they don't have a hand and can't support. The verse for Guanyin is 1,000 hands, 1,000 eyes, help and support living beings everywhere. Help and support. So when you look at that image of Guanyin with all the hands, it's symbolic of this incredible display of compassionate skill and means to help, but literally they're not saviors who save, more like guides. Does that help? Right. I told you, one story was because everything is made from the mind alone, and so people say, well, I want to be born in the Pure Land, where there's no troubles anymore and everything's great, whatever people think that is. So one person asked Master Why, he said, if the Buddha's all powerful and really good, why doesn't he just take us to the Pure Land like that? Could he do it? And Master Wa's answer was, well, maybe he could. Why does he do it? Master Wa said, because as soon as you got there with one thought, you would be back in the impure land again. So he's sort of stressing, yes, there's aid and support, but without a resolve and without your own karma, you're just where you are. So on one hand, it's sobering. On the other hand, it's actually mature, because it's like, I don't know of anything that doesn't happen because of my mistakes or good decisions, even though I like to blame others. And when it goes well, I like to take the credit. So, good. I hope that helps. Anything else? Announcements? I think the monks and 5 laymen are up at Redwood Vihara. There's a Guanyin session coming up usually Ken announces, she's not here tonight. Let's see, we're in February, right? March. Sort of middle of March, a Guanyin session at the City of 10,000 Buddhas. And then you can check the schedule online of the various things that are happening.
There's, I think the summer student center is online.
There's a retreat usually at the Sudana Center during the summer. We'll have another one. I'm guessing there might be something at Buddha Root Farm up in Oregon this summer as well. Yeah. Spring, there's the 10,000 Buddhas bowing repentance usually. You can kiss the ground. Okay, let's do the transference in English. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Bow in respect to the triple jewel.